Thank you everybody for just jumping here after the main keynote. So we did this webinar, 5 series webinar on AI innovation experience throughout the year, and the purpose that we did this was you've been listening to all this AI webinars, seminars, all the time, and it's about hour long, and you barely scratch the surface of what AI means or what AI can do for you, right? And then nothing to so much on the practical use of that for your our industry. So what we envisioned and what we constructed was how we can go through this consecutive series of workshops so that people will start to get to know what AI is to start with, but we'll ended up talking about what it means for the cost, the budget, and the security, and what are the actual practical use cases that we can, you can readily use with the AI. So, with the help of Ritchie and Ping, who's not here, from Valiant, we had a really good use case, and this has been recorded, and you can always go back and see them on the ELFA website webinar series. So. So we're just going to go around, talk about the summary of what we talked about in this webinars, and then we have some questions throughout the webinar, so we can share that with you, or you can give us questions and we can just talk about it. It should be pretty open format. So we got 30 minutes or 25 minutes, so let's go.
Great. Cool. Thanks for coming along. So we might just do a quick recap of the webinar series. If you haven't seen it or if there's something that interests you, they're all recorded online. Jump on, have a look. I'll try to be pretty brief today because I've got a bit of short time. I want to leave a lot of time for Q&A. But to kick off, so we had 5 core sessions, AI foundations, how to become a 100x executive, strategic applications in equipment finance, just what's something practical you can do today, leading AI change. Many of us work in big orgs where that kind of sort of change and new technology like that can be a bit confronting and scary. So how do you help an org transition there? And then a little bit of a technical deep dive. So a big goal of the series was to demystify things a little bit, simplify, and to sort of provide a bit of a framework or a number of frameworks or some sort of ideas. So hopefully we did that, and I'll go through the specifics in a sec. But this was designed for executives. So it was designed for those who might not be on Twitter all day seeing the latest and greatest, but sort of in the boardroom in meetings, but hearing it being talked about, but not knowing what it means, how it impacts them, and what should they be thinking about. So the first topic was all about just foundation. So how did we get here? How did modern AI get to where it is? Three big things. We talked about algorithms, compute, and data were really how we got here, and why now, why not earlier. Then we sort of went through just the basics of how it works. Tokens in, tokens out, reasoning, what does that mean for where AI is going in the future? What are the strengths and weaknesses of current models? And then lastly, a bit of a prompting framework, so Cortex. And there are a number of different of these. This is just one of them, but we kind of went through some practical examples there. Again, because of limited time, I'm going to fire through this, so apologies. We kind of talked about the unlock, algorithms, compute, and data. They're the reason why it's happening now, not in 2020, 2017, 2028. This mixed with a wave of massive capital investment is why we have what we have today. We talked a bit about prompting, because obviously the core of of how you interact with AI right now is text, primarily text. And we talked about how strategies for effective prompting, what goes into a prompt, the mechanics of it, and how it really unpacks and works. So if you want to see a bit of behind the scenes of how that unravels, really encourage you to check out the first session. It was really good, including how training data just massively influences outcome. So we talked through the 6-finger test, which was pretty interesting. So you show AI a photo of a hand with 6 fingers and ask it how many fingers it'll have. It'll be like, that looks like a hand, so I'm going to say 5. And you have to really say, look, no, there's 6. No, there's 6 to recursively kind of teach it, hey, let me reweight those probabilities from all my training data where almost every hand I've seen has 5 fingers. And so we talked about how you can do that in this context. Second session was all about leverage. So as an executive, how do you create leverage for yourselves and for your team using AI? So it was all about understanding signal versus noise, what are good inputs, what are good outputs, what are things you can do for yourself versus things you can do for your team, things like personas, crafting prompts, etc., and role play. I think one very underutilized use case for AI today is role play. You know, if there is someone who's been on the public record a lot, you can chat to them as if you're chatting to them like we are here today. And I think the example I gave in the session was I have a Jamie Dimon chat where all of his shareholder letters, all of his public interviews, it's all out there. So you can actually form a lot about an opinion, a perspective, what would they say, and use that. So I chat to Jamie about strategy regularly, which is pretty neat. He's pretty clever. He's pretty switched on, so it's very useful. And so we kind of talked through just, how does AI help you with the modern executive dilemma? Because there's, kind of never been a day where less is expected of you compared to the prior day, right? So you've got a heap of data drowning in insights. You've got a number of different stakeholders that are all pulling you and drawing different things. You've got time pressures. Everything has to happen faster and quicker and cheaper. How do you balance all that together? And then how do you manage innovation with risk? We want to move fast and break things, but break nothing. And so how do you manage that tension internally? And then ultimately, how do we keep our teams happy? Do they feel threatened? Do they feel excited? How do we capitalize on what they're excited by, but then really manage and help them through where they feel threatened and sort of triage that process effectively? Strategic applications. So we kind of went through the funnel, looked at top of funnel, back of funnel, and how we can support the funnel, leveraging AI. And it's all about the unlock. How do you create efficiency? How do you create scale? How do you celebrate agency and therefore create capability internally? And all of those things are kind of married with a sort of a core function that lets that happen, which is really augmentation, automation, transformation, and then again, capability. So that's really critical because I think as an organization, it's often it's easy to do something thinly layered, but if you're thinking deeply and thinking, okay, how do we not skip all the way forward to replace, but have a roadmap where we're augmenting to start, we're testing and learning, we're piloting, and then we're evolving, a much more effective strategy. So it's units of work were another big thing. I think in the same way cloud computing sort of made compute infinitely available, AI can make certain units of work almost infinitely available. You can scale up and scale down as you want, much the same as cloud compute today. So a really interesting parable. And this is kind of that those things I was mentioning before. Sorry, so efficiency, scale, agency, capability, and how that all maps through. That comparison to cloud, I believe we'll head that way. I think we've already seen such enormous changes in compute just the last year, 2 years. Cloud was similar. I think it wasn't that long ago where you needed a rack in your office to get anything done materially. And now all it takes is a $15 credit card subscription. You have software that cost thousands of dollars only 5-10 years ago. AI will not be dissimilar, where input costs will fall over time at the compute stage. AI change. This was a big one. How do you create the playbook? How do you get the leadership mindset going? How do you discover within your team what everyone's mindset is? And then work with that to form an effective strategy. Developing pilots, preparing your data, understanding security implications, went through a lot of the more practical elements. So this was a really good session. I'd encourage you to jump on and view the full one if you want to get to the nitty gritty. It was a really good one. And then how do you think about investments? Because obviously these experiments aren't cheap. They distract resources. So how do you really set a limit, understand, allocate, and coordinate? And this was sort of a little bit of a playbook of the 5 core things to sort of think about as you're forming up that strategy. and ultimately create sustainable change. You don't want change everyone is fearful of. You don't want change that is super distractive. It's pulling you away from the core strategy you're trying to implement, but still keeping momentum going on adoption of new technologies. And then we did some technical deep dives. This was very much, if you're in IT or SecOps and want to understand, okay, where am I going to get stung here? What do I need? Where is my exposure? This was a really great session. So prompt jailbreaking, prompt injections, a whole host of other things, as well as just how do I create a feedback loop so that I know that my team are on track and I know they're on track, and sort of a controls to input into the process. And so again, we sort of had a similar set of blueprint, I guess, for an implementation strategy. So that was a rapid fire of the 5 sessions, super rapid fire. Probably took too long, but we'll kick into questions now, I think. So do you want to go to the floor or the questions from the session?
No, we can go out to the floor actually. But so one thing that I want to add about the webinar is, so Ritchie was talking about all this, concepts and how to think about AI and AI use cases. But on the second half of the session were actual practical demos. So you can actually see how you're doing prompting, how you're actually collaborating, what are the actual use case on the business side. It's all in every session. So if you haven't seen it again, I would encourage you to go and watch those webinar recordings. So yeah, we don't have that much time. So does anyone have a dying
questions?
Yeah.
Skips in here. When it comes to software development, do you have your team members leveraging AI integrated IDEs?
Yeah, hugely. I would say that 60% of all code we now write is AI generated.
Love that.
All human reviewed, and there's still a very strict PR review process to make sure everything's passing a standard check. And we have a lot of we spend a lot of time implementing linter rules config to make sure that there were very strong guardrails in which AI would write. But I think software engineering is syntax a lot, and that's one thing AI is really good at. It won't do the business logic beautifully, but if you can spend the time to really capture that business logic and prompt it in a way that you are kind of helping bridge into syntax, it can do a beautiful job. So we use a mixture of different tools. Where we found the team, we start off with very much IDE-based tools like Copilot and VS Code, Cursor, etc. Where the team have actually landed as their preferred methodology, all the CLI tools, Claude Code, Codex, and been experimenting with Gemini CLI, but Claude Code seems to be the dominant winner at the moment. Yeah.
Nice. And then second question, I was out in ELFA Innovation Lab, and these conferences have been great, I think, from an executive level. Do you think, or is there a community of technical team members across the industry where they can come together and share cool experiments and tools they're leveraging, or is that something we could create?
Yeah, we should create it.
So I think ELFA is going to talk about this, but they are trying to evolve the Innovation Lab conference, which was the first one this year, and into next year, and more focused on creating a space where we can talk more details together. So I think that'll be part of it. But it would be nice to have that kind of a separate community gathering as well for the tech.
Let's create a Slack channel for the tech leads.
I would love to do hackathons. There's so many data providers here and service providers, etc., where there's some. It's all here. It's just how do we plug everyone into it, and exactly how do we get everyone plugged in and experimenting and seeing what's possible. I think, as an Australian, kind of launching the business in the US, I was saying to someone this morning actually, everyone is, despite all competing, exceptionally collaborative still too, and so I think there's a lot of room for that kind of thing, which would be awesome.
And actually, quickly add to you're working on actual coding with AI. From the project management, the business side of point of view, you used to just wait for your service provider partners to create something for you to start the POC. You can finally visualize it after a month of discussion about requirements. But now you can leverage AI and in-house start creating a very simple POC product for you to internally have experience about what the final outcome will be. So you can actually, get to that level much quicker, and evaluate the value very quickly. So I think that's something from the business side, how AI can excel, especially on the product deployment point of view. So, any question? Next question.
Hi, this is Ajay from Ultra. I think, Moto, you read my mind. I was going to ask about the second phase in the AI playbook, right? Rich, you mentioned about piloting. What is the most effective and practical use case, the smallest one, that you have come across for the industry, which leaders have adopted and implemented without thinking too much of investment, or, hey, this is going to take a lot of bandwidth or cost for my team. Can I just start small? Any experience on that?
Yeah, plenty. I think where we found success is where you naturally have a champion, and the scope is limited to a small team, whether it be a small part of a team's function or something where it doesn't massively disrupt a workflow, but you can see how it easily augments or helps support it. Because I think ultimately you want to boil it down to, okay, what KPI are we moving? Because that's the language that you can speak upwards with, language you can talk with in your team where everyone understands. And so whether it be an SLA on timing, whether it be a conversion rate or whichever. So I think what we found successful with pilots is keeping it very narrowly scoped. So one champion, one team, one metric, and really honing in there. So one example we've had that we've done internally is just sort of time to follow up. So AI is wonderful at taking a bunch of inputs and turning it into an actionable email you can send, etc. It's not going to send the email for you. It's not going to do the work, but it'll help you get from A to B much faster in a more professional, articulate, more detailed way. So very, very simple. Okay, here's like a prompt that you can use to generate this style of follow-up that takes in these data sources. And that takes a little bit of plumbing, but not a huge amount of resources because it's all elements that their team have already. The first version of it was actually in Salesforce, so just a text dump was generated that they copy and pasted in with the prompt. Super basic, not very good at all, but you could tell immediately the level of response we were getting back from customers and a few other things just elevated because the comms going out were more professional, they were more standardized, they were more uniform, and we found that, okay, now we should probably go to the effort where how do we extend this elsewhere, make that process better where there's no copy pasting. I think just start small, and I think, the internal champion's a big one where you'll be shocked how many people have great ideas if you just give them a little bit of rope, but then set up the ring fences enough where they're not going to go and create huge rep risk for the company. It's very well contained. It's hard for it to go wrong.
Thank you.
All right, I got a quick. Is this on? All right, quick question there's so many providers out here, even that are here this week, right, that can provide different AI tools and different things. In your experience, is it better to hire internally some fresh kid out of college that knows AI and start testing some of this stuff on your own, or going with these canned tools that then you've got to go manipulate and make sure it fits your data set? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. I'm probably going to tar this with my personal perspective, which may not work for every org. I'm a massive believer in being model and provider agnostic with tools like this, just because they're changing so frequently. Yeah. What you'll also find is as you get to start to use a model, you'll know its nuances and quirks. The way that I prompt Claude is quite different to the way I'd prompt an OpenAI model, just because they do behave, they're trained slightly differently, they're solving for different things. And so I think that I would, and again, this is what I was saying about that champion you find that person that is just excited about AI generally. And so they're kind of a generalist knowing about what's going on. They might not be super deep in one area, but they know enough to go, hey, maybe we need to try this thing over here because I know that this exists now, rather than being set on a path that in 6 months' time maybe somewhat obsolete or may be not the best thing. And I think flexibility was such a huge part of our AI strategy. Just not committing to a model, not committing to tooling, but then knowing when and where you can go deep. Ultimately, yeah.
Quickly add to that, there are now providers who would actually curate different models for you. So you can actually get to the service and you can run through questions, and certain question will be answered better with this model, or a certain other question will be answered better with the other model. But you can have access to all these different platforms using that curated service, so you don't have to be stuck with one.
If you're thinking of basic prompting rather than anything more deep, Open Router, which I think I talked about in one of the sessions, is a great example of that, where one integration, you can basically pick and choose which model it fires off to. You can have 4 windows up, the same prompt, click go, and it'll fire it, and you'll see in real time how differently all 4 models are responding. So experiment, I think, is my biggest. Be flexible and keep experimenting, I think. Open Router. Yeah, so it's effectively a unified API for LLMs. So one integration and effectively choose your model from a drop-down from any provider. Very, very good. Any other questions? We actually had a question from the sessions around why we chose Claude. Probably worth just touching on that, a bit of a segue. It's a personal preference. Again, I think also doesn't get as much airtime as ChatGPT, so a lot of people don't know it exists. But in reality, I think it's probably better suited for more analytical, more academic kind of use cases. So that's why we used it. I know that question came up.
And another one I think it's not gonna it's gonna go more than 5 minutes about it, but it's like some people are asking about how AI will affect your team, like the call center, the customer service team, like how they feel. Should they be fear about losing their job, or like where their place would be with AI, right?
Great question. I think they should just be really excited about how much more productive they can be soon. I think we work in an industry where customers really value talking to a person about something that's sensitive to them, that is delicate, it's either their business or their livelihood, or something that they don't understand or feel there's risk attached to it. So I think something like call center, credit analysis, etc. AI is going to be really beautiful to help support and augment that process. And I think there's more value in doing that than replacing it. And so I think you might do some things, where there's an agent that can handle out-of-hours calls. Sure, makes sense. Help support customers over a greater period. You're still delivering a better customer experience. But when it comes to support or something where someone's like, I need to just get this solved, having a person who's better equipped with the tools, leveraging AI to summarize, to help distill the core of what's going on and service them better, I think will always result in a better outcome. So a lot of the AI we're building is to help, how do we support either the programs that use our embedded platform, and whether it be a sales-assisted journey or a retail journey or a kind of a lease desk style journey, or their customers. And I think that's one, it definitely feels less threatening, but 2, the conversation becomes less about how do I remove that FTE requirement and how do I make that FTE do 3 times more, without it feeling like they're doing 3 times more. They don't feel the pressure. They don't feel they actually feel empowered. And I don't think there's anyone you'd talk to where they'd be pretty happy to say, oh, I'd like love to feel like I do my job worse, So I think that's a pretty exciting evolution. Now, obviously, there'll be a period where targets, REM, etc., all slowly creeps up to meet where the capability is. But we're in this really beautiful little gap where if you are adopting these technologies early on, it can create a bit of a competitive advantage. As all good things, that arbitrage will get bid down over time, but there is a gap now where that opportunity is there.
Yeah, and also like just running the process. You don't want to have a person running a same operation 24 hours, 24/7, right? And so you can get those burden of just running the process side by the AI and having those people be elevated to talk about more of a customer experience, like designing a better customer experience. You'll be there for the customer when they need you, right? So they have more time to invest in those timing and more knowledge transfer than just processing a operation. So I think you can kind of divide that into two and just get them excited about it.
I think the engineering question earlier, with AI, all of our senior engineers are happier, because they have a team of 3 juniors that they can work with 24 hours a day on call. There's an instant feedback loop. They love that. Yeah. So it's supporting and empowering, not replacing at all.
And again, AI is not a perfect employee. There will be more of an intern or a new employee. You have to diligently teach them how to do the process, right? So that's the way you go. So there's not going to be somebody super perfect to come and replace you, right? So, but there will be a good candidate who will learn and who will always remember what they learn, and they'll continue to work on it tirelessly 24/7. So that's the perspective I think we can bring to the business team about AI. So.